Freeze a human solid and they won't wake up again. Remove most of the water from our body and we die. Take away oxygen for long enough, and the result is the same. But nature has produced animals capable of surviving conditions that sound almost impossible. Some can partially freeze, others can survive extraordinary dehydration. One can regenerate parts of its own body, and near the end, we'll meet an animal that has even survived direct exposure to the environment of space. So how are any of them still alive? 1. The wood frog. The frog that freezes. Imagine spending winter partially frozen. Your heart stops beating. You stop breathing. Ice forms in parts of your body. Then spring arrives, and you become active again. For certain wood frogs, that's part of surviving winter. Wood frogs live across parts of North America, including regions with extremely cold winters. When temperatures fall, ice can form in extracellular spaces within their bodies. Normally, freezing is catastrophic because ice crystals and changes in water balance can damage cells. But wood frogs accumulate substances, including glucose, that help protect their tissues during freezing. Their metabolism falls dramatically. When temperatures rise, they thaw and resume normal activity. The frog isn't magically immune to freezing, and there are limits to what it can tolerate. But surviving substantial freezing at all is remarkable, and our next animal uses almost the opposite strategy. Instead of surviving too much water turning into ice, it survives with almost no water at all. 2. The water-holding frog. Waiting for rain. Australia contains environments where rain can be unpredictable. For an amphibian, that's a serious problem. Frogs normally depend heavily on moisture. Some Australian burrowing frogs deal with dry periods by retreating underground. They reduce their activity dramatically and enter a state called estivation. Some can form protective layers around themselves that help reduce water loss while they wait underground for wetter conditions. Then rain finally arrives. The animals emerge, feed, breed, and take advantage of the temporary abundance. Rather than defeating the desert, they effectively wait it out. But some animals take survival without water to an entirely different level. We'll come back to that later. First, what happens when the problem isn't water, but oxygen? 3. The naked mole rat, surviving low oxygen. Naked mole rats already look unusual. They spend much of their lives in underground tunnel systems in eastern Africa. Large groups living underground can encounter conditions with lower oxygen and higher carbon dioxide than we'd tolerate comfortably. Their physiology has several unusual adaptations associated with subterranean life. Research has shown that naked mole rats can tolerate remarkably low oxygen conditions compared with most mammals. Under extreme oxygen deprivation, they can dramatically reduce activity and alter how their cells obtain energy. That doesn't mean they're impossible to kill or that they can live indefinitely without oxygen. But for a mammal, their tolerance is extraordinary. Their strange appearance gets most of the attention. Their biology is even stranger. And our next animal has a survival ability humans have been trying to understand for a very different reason. 4. The axolotl, rebuilding what was lost. Lose an arm, and the human body cannot simply grow another one. An axolotl can regenerate a lost limb. These unusual amphibians originate from the lake systems around Mexico City. They retain juvenile characteristics throughout adulthood, including their distinctive external gills. But what makes them scientifically fascinating is regeneration. Axolotls can regenerate limbs and repair several other tissues with remarkable effectiveness. Cells around an injury participate in forming regenerative tissue, which then develops into replacement structures. Scientists study axolotls partly because understanding how regeneration works could improve our knowledge of wound healing and tissue repair. The animal isn't immortal, but its ability to rebuild complex structures makes our own healing abilities look surprisingly limited. Yet regeneration isn't the strangest survival strategy in nature. Sometimes the solution is simply to stop almost everything. 5. The African lungfish. Surviving when the water disappears. A fish without water sounds like a very short story. But African lungfish have an extraordinary strategy for surviving drought. When their aquatic habitat begins drying up, some lungfish can burrow into mud. They produce a mucus cocoon around themselves and dramatically reduce their metabolism. Instead of relying solely on gills, lungfish possess lungs and can breathe atmospheric oxygen. During estivation, they can remain in this low-energy state for extended periods until water returns. Then, when conditions improve, they emerge. Think about how strange that is. A fish survives the disappearance of its watery world by burying itself and waiting. But our next survivor doesn't wait for conditions to improve. It lives in conditions that seem hostile almost all the time. 6. Emperor penguins. Winter at the bottom of the world. Antarctic winter is one of the harshest environments experienced by any bird. Extreme cold, powerful winds, long periods of darkness. Yet emperor penguins breed during this season. After the female lays a single egg, the male balances it on his feet beneath a fold of skin called a brood pouch. Males gather together in dense huddles. And here's the clever part. The huddle isn't static. Penguins gradually change positions, allowing individuals to move between colder outer areas and warmer inner regions. It's survival through cooperation. One penguin alone would face a far greater challenge. Thousands acting together create a moving system for conserving heat. But even emperor penguins need functioning metabolism and liquid water inside their cells. Our final animal can take survival much further. 7. The tardigrade, the animal that almost switches off. You've probably seen pictures of it. A microscopic creature with 8 legs and an oddly endearing appearance, the tardigrade, often called a water bear. Under normal conditions, tardigrades aren't particularly dramatic. They live in films of water in environments including mosses and sediments. But when conditions deteriorate, some species can enter a state called cryptobiosis. Their metabolism drops to extremely low levels. Their bodies lose much of their water and contract into a resistant form called a ton. In this state, certain tardigrades can tolerate extremes that would rapidly kill most animals. Severe dehydration, very low temperatures, some unusually high temperatures for limited periods, high radiation doses, and even the vacuum of space under experimental conditions. In 2007, tardigrades were exposed outside a spacecraft in low Earth orbit as part of an experiment. Some survived exposure to the vacuum and later recovered. That doesn't mean tardigrades are indestructible. They absolutely have limits. But their ability to suspend much of normal biological activity helps them endure extraordinary conditions. And that reveals something important about all the animals we've seen. None of these animals actually breaks the laws of biology. The wood frog protects its tissues while partially freezing. Burrowing frogs reduce water loss and weight. Naked mole rats are adapted to challenging underground atmospheres. Axolotls regenerate damaged structures. Lungfish dramatically reduce their metabolism during drought. Penguins survive partly through cooperation. And tardigrades can enter an almost suspended biological state. What looks impossible to us isn't impossible at all. It's evolution solving problems in ways humans never needed to. And perhaps that's why extreme animals are so scientifically valuable. They show us that the limits of life aren't necessarily where we assume they are. If you could borrow one of these survival abilities, which would you choose? Surviving freezing, regrowing a limb, or almost completely shutting your body down until conditions improved? Tell us in the comments, and subscribe to Knowledge Dynamics for more strange science, incredible animals, and discoveries that reveal just how extraordinary our world really is.